Hi and welcome, dear students, to our series of grammar in use. In this lesson, we are going to explore about the past perfect continuous tense, and we are going to distinguish it or compare it with other tenses and where it is used and how is it different from other tenses. You are requested to grab a pen and a notepad so that you can take down the pointers and construct sentences along with this. Let us dive into it. The past perfect continuous tense. First of all, let us understand what is past perfect continuous tense, how it is constructed, and what does it mean when we use a past perfect continuous tense. English uses the past perfect continuous with the past simple, that means simple past tense, to talk about an activity that was in progress before another action or event happened. So, the first thing that we understand from past perfect continuous tense is that it was an ongoing activity in the past that was progressing in the past, and after that another activity interrupted it or another activity had taken place. So this is our first understanding of past perfect continuous tense. Now let us look at the pointer that we have before us and understand it better. The past simple or the simple past tense refers to a specific completed event in the past. Now when we say specific completed event in the past, that means it has got certain specific time zone mentioned to it. Also the action becomes specific. Because it becomes specific, we use simple past tense. Now for a non-specific, that means a continued duration, we will look at past perfect continuous tense. The past perfect continuous tense describes a repeated action or continuing activity that was taking place before that completed event. That means on the timeline, we are always in the present zone, that means now, and we have got two actions which have been completed in the past. One action is closer to us when we walk back on the timeline. The first action is closer to us. So for the closer action, we use simple past tense. And when we go back further down on the timeline, we see a past continuous action which continued for certain duration in the past. We use past perfect continuous tense for that. So we have got two activities to consider. For a long duration in the past, an activity was progressing. A short activity interrupted it. So we have got two activities and two tenses to use. For the nearest activity on the timeline, we use the simple past tense. For the further or the distinct or the faraway activity, we use past perfect continuous tense. The action continued for a long duration. It is continuing or not continuing, that is not the question, but another activity is has interrupted it. For that activity, we use a simple past tense. That is how we use two different tenses, and the reason for simple past and past perfect continuous tense is that the nearest on the timeline takes simple past tense. Now let us look at the example that we have before us. He had been studying English for 2 years before he went to London. Now we have got two such tenses over here. First action is that he had been studying English for 2 years. Because certain time, specific time duration is given, so we use past perfect continuous tense. That means this action continued for a specific duration in the past. The interrupting action is that before he went to London. That means the action completed, and the next action that started and completed was he went to London. So on the timeline, we have got two actions One is that he went to London. Second is that he before that he had been studying for 2 years. So for he went to London, we use simple past tense because that is the interrupting action or the short term action or the simple past tense, or a long term duration is that past perfect continuous tense. The second example that we have before us is by the time Katie arrived home, she had been driving for 6 hours. Now there are two actions again. By the time Katie arrived. Now Katie arrived is the short term interrupting action, so we use simple past tense. She had been driving for 6 hours is a long term progressive action in the past. So, on the timeline, it is actually for 6 hours she had been driving a car and then she arrived home. Both the actions completed in the past. On the timeline, you are here in the present or now. Now, when you are here in the present and now, you are the one who is going to walk back on the timeline. When you see the timeline, you will see the first action that is nearest to you is that Katie arrived home. And the second action when you walk back on the timeline is that she had been driving for 6 hours prior to arriving. So you will use simple past tense for arrived. Katie arrived home, and prior to that she had been driving. So past perfect continuous tense for that. Now let us proceed to see the structure, how it is constructed, and what words are used for constructing past perfect continuous tense. We look at the structure first. We have the subject. Subject can be he, she, it, they. It can be noun or a pronoun. We are using a pronoun over here. Then had been is used where had understands for past tense. Been is a part of the perfect continuous tense, perfect tense. Verb is in the ing form, that is studying. So we have had been studying. This is the structure that is together for past perfect continuous tense, where had stands for the past, been is for the been studying is for the perfect continuous tense. The rest of the sentence structure is present English for 2 years. Had been doesn't change with the subject. So, had been remains as such, and it is an essential part of the past perfect continuous tense where the verb is with ing. The verb can change, but had been remains constant. So he had been studying English for 2 years is the sample sentence that we have before us. At present, you may construct a few sentences for a better understanding. Let us proceed. Now, over here, I have constructed a timeline for your reference. You can see that you are here in the time zone that is now, and then when you walk back on the timeline you will see that one action is here and another action that was continuing in the past is here. The one that is action that is nearest to you is in simple past tense. The action that continued for a long duration and completed or maybe completing or progressing, that is in the past perfect continuous tense. Now, let us see the examples that we have before us. She decided to buy a new car before her old one had been working for weeks. She decided to buy a new car because her old one hadn't been working for weeks. Now, her old car had not been working for weeks is the past perfect continuous tense. She decided to buy a new car is the action that is obstructing not working of the car. She got a new car, so that is in simple past tense. The next example that we have before us is I went to see the doctor after I had been feeling unwell for a few days. I went to see the doctor is the action on the timeline that is in simple past, and after I had been feeling unwell for a few days, This had been feeling unwell is a continued action in the past, and the obstructing action is that you went to the hospital. So the I went is in simple past and had been feeling is in past perfect continuous tense. The next example that we have before us is the band had been rehearsing every day, so they won the competition. Now over here, they won the competition is the closer on the timeline to us. So it is in simple past, they won, and they had been rehearsing is in the past perfect continuous tense. It's an action that continued in the past tense. The next example that we have is I had been training to be a dancer until I broke my leg. So broke my leg is in simple past, that is the nearest action, and had been training for a long duration, that is a past perfect continuous tense. Let us proceed and see other examples. The present perfect continuous and past perfect continuous. What is the difference between the two and when to use it? Now let us first understand when to use present perfect continuous tense. The present perfect continuous is used to talk about an action in progress or repeated activity that was taking place until the present moment. So the action, the activity continued and it is coming and you are in the present zone. So it is happening, some continued activities taking place in the present zone. I am really thirsty. I had been cycling for 2 hours. Now, this is also in present tense and this is in present tense. Now, this is in present tense, right? So this it has got some impact in the moment or current moment, and because of certain activity. What is that certain activity? Continued activity. I have been cycling for 2 hours. So, I have been cycling for 2 hours is a present perfect continuous tense, and it has got some impact in the current moment. Whether it is continuing or not, it has moved into the present zone. Now how is it different? First of all, let us understand what is past perfect continuous tense and how is it different with the present perfect continuous tense. Let us see one example. The past perfect continuous is used to talk about an ongoing action or a repeated activity that was taking place until another specified moment in the past. That means some other activity took place in between in the past. So if I were to mention, now we are in the present zone. If we go back on the timeline, we'll see the closer activity, I was really thirsty, and further down for 2 hours before, I had been cycling for 2 hours. Now we see the difference between the two. You will see that this was spoken soon after this 2 hours long activity got over. So it is mentioned in I am really thirsty. I have been cycling for 2 hours. And now it time elapsed and a little longer time further down on the timeline. When you are mentioning it to someone, you will mention these activities as past tense. Now, earlier there was only one activity and you happened to mention it in the present. Now you have got two completed activities in the past. So for the nearest activity, you will use simple past tense, and for the activity that is further down on the timeline, you will use past perfect continuous tense. At this moment, you may construct sentences. Thank you very much. With this, we have come to an end of the lesson. If you like the lesson, kindly click on like, share and subscribe. Thank you very much for your kind attention.